Hi, welcome, and thank you for joining me today to talk about vocabulary selection. Brief introduction about me. My name is Jessica Broderick. I'm a speech-language pathologist and assistive technology professional. I currently work out in Western Nebraska, and special thanks to the Nebraska Assistive Technology Partnership for letting me talk to you today. So today's topic is vocabulary selection. And before we get into what the specifics of this webinar are going to be, I'm doing 5 of these, and my overarching theme or goal or hope by the time that you've watched these and put some of these actions into practice is that we move our students who are AAC users from being present in a classroom. So maybe that they get some inclusion time, but they get to sit in the classroom and don't do a whole lot of participation. So we move them from being present to being participants into being competitors. So it's great that they're able to participate, but we want them to be able to compete with their peers and have meaningful interactions and learn what their peers are learning and have a chance at equal access and equal answering questions and equal curriculum and all those kinds of things. So what we're going to talk about today is what core vocabulary is. This is a really important concept when we're talking about our AAC users and learners and what we're including in their device and what we're teaching them. We're going to talk about fringe vocabulary and when we include that, what that is, how we include it, when we include it. And then how to go about organizing systems. And so when I was thinking about putting these webinars together, I thought a lot about the questions that I get a lot. So there are some common themes, common questions that I get a lot when people come to me and ask about AAC or ask for advice or need help or whatever. And so these are some of the big things that I talk to them about. So I hope it's helpful for you too. All right, so first up, we're going to talk about defining core vocabulary. What is that and what resources are available to you? So research tells us that English has 100,000 plus words. So there are a lot of words that we have access to, and educated adults use around 15,000 of those words that are in their vocabulary in their normal repertoire. There have been a lot of studies about core vocabulary. And you can see I've listed 4 of those at the bottom. We won't spend time going over those. But there are these core vocabulary studies that show that of those words, that about 350 of them make up 80% of what we say. So there are words that are very frequently occurring that make up 80% of what we say. So even though we have access to all of these words, what we use is a very small number of those. So those words, those 350 or so words is what's referred to in the research and the literature as core vocabulary. As way of illustration, I'm going to show you this handout. This is something that will be available to you in your handout folder. This is from AAC Language Lab, which is a fabulous website for all things AAC. But so just to kind of let you know what we're talking about, these are 100 frequently used core words and things that are often included in like a core word AAC system. So you can see that these come from all parts of speech. They're interjections, prepositions, helping verbs, adjectives, conjunctions, verbs, and all those kinds of things. So these are the kind of words that we're talking about when we are talking about core vocabulary. So 3 important observations about core vocabulary. One is that the research tells us that it's consistent across populations, across activities, places, topics, and demographic regions. So these are the same kinds of words that people are using most often if they're 3 or 30 or 80. That it doesn't matter what age you are, what activity you're doing, where you are in time or space, what you're talking about. these words are consistent. The problem is that not a lot of those words contain good picture producers. So I think one of the things we do sometimes when we're first starting a language system or setting up an AAC system is think about what picture am I going to use for that? And so core vocabulary doesn't have a lot of things that produce pictures that are very intuitive. So if you're thinking about the word that, how do you represent that in a symbol? If you're thinking about the word same or different or turn or on, those aren't things that really give you good pictures. And so that's been an issue with really implementing and getting core vocabulary going. So that leads me to number 3, is that even though this vocabulary makes up more than, 75% of what adults and children say, it really isn't included in AAC systems because it's difficult to represent. When we are building our AAC systems, we have a noun bias because nouns give us pictures. And I certainly have absolutely been guilty of this. You know, I can recall many systems that I set up and I was like, this kid loves Legos and blocks and this ball and these mini M&Ms. And I can easily snap a quick picture of those, get them on his device, and he can just, you know, he can ask for those, he can demand for those. So those are easy to represent. So we use those a lot. But it's important to remember that nouns aren't acquired in isolation. And so we need to make sure that we have core vocabulary and access to those things for our kids so that they can manipulate language. So we know, I brought up Brown's stages of language development down at the bottom and put an eek kind of thing. If you think back to child development classes or language development classes that you take, we know that nouns are acquired in tandem with verbs and adjectives and other parts of speech, not competition. And so if we are thinking about typical language development in children, we get things like agents and actions, actions and objects. So kids, when they're first starting to talk, are saying things like daddy sit, eat cookie, go out, which you can see with is more than half core vocabulary, or not just nouns, sit, eat, go, out. And so it's important, and I would challenge you to shift the way you're thinking about what we're including in AAC devices or systems or on low-tech communication boards or on any kind of alternative communication system, and include that core vocabulary and give kids access to all of those early words and concepts. So one of the resources I will give you to do that is the Project Core website. And this is something from Erickson, Hatch, and Dennis. And they set out with the goal to develop this universal core vocabulary system for use in school for every student. So it didn't matter what their cognitive ability was. It didn't matter if they were using a manual board where they were pointing to things. It didn't matter if they were using a really high-tech eye gaze system. They wanted the same universal core that was relevant for any kid in any environment for any ability level. And so through their studies, what they came up with was this set of 36 high-frequency single words. And you can see those on the right-hand side in the picture there. So they have things included like, go, she, in, on, question words, stop, same, different, more, those kinds of things. So those are things that can be used across environments and across students. So you can access this. It's online, free resources. It's project-core.com. So if you just Google that, it'll bring you right to it. So I wanted to show you a few things on this website, a few resources. The first is something that is scrolling across here. and it's that they have a lot of professional development. So they have 12 free modules and trainings to help you with implementing this. So if this is something that you are thinking, I really need to get into this or learn more, they have awesome professional development that you can access on demand for free. They have some teaching supports and implementation supports. So if you are ready to get going, they have some free resources, how you might do that. There's some things for planning instruction, how to use their 3D symbols, which we'll talk a little bit about more, some quick reference guides, and then even some classroom posters that you can post up. They have a list of communication apps and SGDs, which is a speech generating device that they have worked with, that they have partnered with to research. So if you're looking for a good place to get started, they have a list of different apps and companies that they've worked with. So you'll see Proloquo to Go, Cough Drop is one I hear a lot, things from PRC, which is the LAMP system, Toby Dynavox, Speak for Yourself. And so there are references for all of these companies and how they've worked together and how to use the core vocabulary found within those different apps and devices. And finally, and maybe the coolest thing, if you click on their Universal Core tab, you have, so first of all, there's a selection tool. So if you're not sure where to get started with a student, this is just a little quiz that goes through, what's the student's vision like? How do they need something that's small, something that's bigger? Can they pick something from a field of 4, or can they pick from more? What's their receptive skills like? Those kinds of things. So that will direct you to a format that would give you a good place to start. So if you're just getting started, that's a great resource. Now down here, they have their boards for free, just totally free. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel or anything. So the one that I showed you in the presentation is their 36 location board. So that just tells us that it has 36 pictures on it. And I'll just show you that. And so that's what that looks like. So if you have a student who's ready to get started with this, or you want to print a bunch of these for the teachers, for the paras, for the parents to have at home, you just have free access to any of those. There are a bunch of different symbols. So the ones we just looked at were PCS symbols. There's ones made with lesson pick symbols, widget symbols. These are on legal size paper. And then they also have a high contrast version. So if you're working with students who have visual impairments, it's an option to have a black background on all of those. So they have a bunch of different options for their 36 location boards, but then they also have, if you have a student who that would be too much visual information, visual overload, they have like 4 in a square, they have 9, they have 4 that's just a line. So a lot of different options. They even have a setup for eye gaze there as well. They give you free access to a classroom poster. So if you wanted to print that and have that at the front of the room, or in your therapy room, or in your house, or wherever you're at, to model, which we'll talk about modeling in one of the other webinars. But there's big poster size boards. And then they also have 3D symbols, which I just started using this last year. And those come for free in like a file or a format that a 3D printer would open. And so all you need to make those is to find somebody with a 3D printer. So we had one of our high school classes print a bunch of those for us. And so if you have a student who does have a complete visual impairment and wouldn't be able to really see, to point to a board to communicate, those end up being about that big. And depending on their like part of speech and what they are, there's triangles, there's circles, squares, I think there's some hexagons. They're different colors. They all have different textures around the edges. And then they also have the Braille word if you have a student working on Braille, and then some kind of symbol. So it's a very tactile way for students to communicate if they do not have vision, or maybe they just have some cognitive impairments that lead that to be the best option for them. So There are a lot of great options there. I would encourage you to check out that website. Okay, so the other type of vocabulary we have in systems is called fringe vocabulary. So when we talk about core vocabulary, that's all those high frequently occurring words that we just talked about. And then fringe vocabulary are more of the low frequency words. So these are things that would be specific to that person or specific to an activity, and they are usually nouns. So that might be the name of Aunt Catherine. It might be Uncle John. It might be the dog's name. It might be things like that. So as an example, just if the topic is baseball, you know, we're going to a baseball game, the activity is baseball. And we might have the words that I have listed on the left, the core words that we could talk about baseball. So go, turn, look, eat, want, like, all of those. And we might also then have the fringe words about baseball, like baseball, bat, ball, pitcher, catcher, base. And so you could have a pretty involved conversation with an AAC user only using core words. If that's the level they're at, you know, you could talk about go fast, go slow, this good, not good, play more, all kinds of those things without ever using fringe words. But you can see how the fringe words would be important depending on what we're doing. So how do we pick fringe? How do we know what kind of fringe we need or what would be most relevant to the student? I have two handouts for you here. One is a preschool vocabulary selection questionnaire. And this just goes through what the purpose is, what you're doing, and then all of the fringe vocabulary that that student might need or that would be helpful to that student. So you're looking at what people do they talk about? Do they use daddy? Do they use grandma? Is there a friend? You can talk about specific family members or names, people, teachers at school, friends at school, places that your family goes a lot, what stores, restaurants, activities that your child enjoys at home, in the community, at school, any songs that they really enjoy, toys that they really like, school materials they need, pets that you have, things in the house, body parts, those kinds of things. So that's a great way to get some input from a teacher or parent or caregiver to pick some fringe vocabulary. There's also one I'm providing you that's school age vocabulary selection. So if you're working with a student who is more school age, and this you'll see it kind of goes through a lot of the same things and asks what words do you feel your child absolutely needs to communicate in order to function. So those are sometimes interesting because you hear something from a family that you're like, oh, I never would have thought about that before, but it's really important to them. Ask for family members, for pets, what I like to do with dad, what do I call my grandparents on each side, professionals that they go to, school people that they work with, who their friends are at school, places they go to at home and at school. And so this just gives you some ways to gather information about what kind of fringe vocabulary might be relevant for kids. And so when we're thinking about systems that really work for kids, this is kind of a wrap up of this section. We want to include a lot of core words and some fringe words. And so a good rule that I've always heard is that 80% of what you're including and what you're teaching is core and 20% is fringe, and that's regardless of tech level. So if they're using eye gaze, that's 80-20. If they are using a low tech manual board, that's 80-20. If you're teaching sign even, that's 80-20. So keep that in mind when you're setting things up and picking vocabulary. Okay, so for the last thing we're going to talk about today is system organization. And I think this is a question I get almost probably the most often is how do I put it together, or how do I make sense? Or, you know, we've built them a folder for when they're in science class and a folder for when they're in art class. Should I have the word more or need in both places? And so how does that look? How is it set up? And so our goal is to help our clients say what they want, when they want, how they want. And so it's important to offer them a lot of single words like we looked at with the core vocabulary, because that supports language growth. It helps us when we get to the point where we want them to go from using 2 to 3 words, from 3 to 4 words, expand their utterances, and it helps them learn more morphology when we get there. So adding a plural S, adding a past tense, making she into her, those kinds of things. So this concept is called spontaneous novel utterance generation, and sometimes you might hear it referred to as SNUG, just an abbreviation there. So I would really encourage you, we want to make things easy for kids, and so we want to script a full sentence, so that might be, I need more, I need more, I need more. And so anytime that student presses the word more, or the symbol for more, you get the whole sentence, which does give them more of a full idea. But when they have surpassed that level and you're wanting them to learn need more, you want them to learn those words separately, you've got them all programmed together, if that makes sense. And I need more is not the only context in which they would use the word more. And so they might be wanting to say no more. And anytime they use that more symbol, it says, I need more. And so now you're getting no, I need more. And so using single words instead of phrases gives them the flexibility to say what they want to say and how they want to say it. And at the bottom there, I have a question: do we script full sentences? And my answer is maybe, which is an answer I love to give, depending on the situation. So, I have worked with clients before who want, one of their buttons to say something like, I need more time. Something where that's just something they need to quick fire to somebody to say, I need more time. And then they compose maybe a longer message on their device, or something quick like, I didn't understand that, or I use an AAC device. So something that they just need to say quickly and maybe don't always need to formulate the message. But if we're talking about every day, talking about like, I want to go or I need more, I would encourage you not to do that and to instead work on the language skills and building the language skills of that kid. So setting up systems kind of has two ways that it can go. One is needs-based and one is language-based. Needs-based might be kind of like what I referenced earlier, that this is the folder we use when we're in science. This is the folder of vocabulary we use when we're in art. This has a bunch of nouns specific to whatever environment or activity students are in. And we'll talk more about the difference between these and this in the webinar about teaching procedures and descriptive teaching. But here's a brief preview, I guess. And the problem with the needs-based system is that it has to be constantly updated. And it assumes that words are always connected to one topic. So if we're talking about the word more, almost every environment you could possibly be in, you could use the word more. And so you would have to have programmed more in every single folder or activity or page you're making. And it's kind of based on our intuition about here's the vocabulary I think that kid might need in art, when there are 100 different things that our typically developing students could be talking about in art. They might be talking about the football game last night in art class, and all our student on the AAC device has is about paintbrushes and markers and stuff. So I like language-based systems because it supports communication across environments. So those language-based systems are the ones that we've built around core vocabulary with that 20% fringe. That language-based systems support SNUG, that spontaneous novel utterance generation. And it gives our kids the option to have new ideas and to say things that we maybe never would have expected them to talk about in art class or wherever they're at. And so I really would encourage you to use a language-based system based on what you know about typically developing kids' language, rather than things really specific to those different environments or activities. Okay, so by way of example, I'm using the phrase, "I've got to run." And so what does run mean? So depending on if I say, I've got to run, that means, hey, I've got to go somewhere, like I've got to get going, right? Or if I say, oh, I've got to run, I might be talking about my workout plan, and today's cardio day, and I've got to run today. And I could also be, kind of looking down at my leg and saying, oh, I've got to run, and maybe I'm talking about my pantyhose have run. Or I could be saying, playing cards and saying, I've got to run, and I've got like a 4, 5, 6, 7. And so what we say, that word run, is dependent on the nonverbal things that I'm doing with it and the context in which I'm saying it. And so it doesn't matter how I'm saying the word run. It matters what I'm doing in connection with it. And so, one of the issues with an activity-based system would be that if run can mean so many different things in so many different contexts, and you could never be able to include it in every folder or page that a student might need it. And so to teach things where they're at, like on a core page, will get you more bang for your buck, really. And the other question I think I get is, where do I put things? And it doesn't matter, if that's in the top right or the middle or the bottom right, it doesn't matter. As long as you keep that consistent where that word is found. And the example I'd like to use for this is, again, that word run. So if you are a speech language pathologist listening to this, you know that the sound can be made with your tongue bunched up in the back of your mouth, or a retroflex R, where the tongue tip kind of curls. And so asking students to say run, if you're meaning it as in the exercise, when you say that and you're meaning the exercise, that you need to use a retroflex R with your tongue tip back. But if you're talking about run as in gotta go run, that you used a bunched R. And that's not something we would teach kids. And so we wouldn't want to teach them that during this activity, run is on the top left of the page, but during this other activity, run is on the top right of the page. So if you do end up planning some activity-based pages, keep things as consistent as possible. And think of, that for a student using AAC, that motor plan is very much like the articulation plan that they're using. So just they're learning how to say the word run based on this is how I get to run every single time, this button and this button and this. Just like my mouth just knows how to make an R sound for the beginning of run. So I always like to think of a motor plan like an articulation plan. And we wouldn't ask kids to switch that up depending on activity. A few additional resources before we finish here. One is this core word of the week, which is a handout I've provided to you. This is from the Center for AAC and Autism. And it does use like the LAMP or Unity board look here. But that doesn't matter because it has a lot of good information. So it would be able to be used with whatever system you're using. But it goes through all of these words. So a bunch of core words. It's 93 pages of stuff and talks to you about how you might use that word. So the first one they have is stop. So they say, this is so powerful. It expresses protest. Here's how to do it. Set up situations where your child can use stop. Here's how they can use it to request. They can request that an activity is over. Some are interested in transportation. Cars stop, buses stop, trains stop. You can set up situations where they can control their environment. So you're jumping and a child tells you to stop. And then how to pair it with stop and go, stop and that, stop it. So it just has beautiful information about all of these different words. There's like a page per word and gives you a lot of practical hints and strategies on how you might teach that word or how to use that word, how to prompt kids to say those words. And then the other resource I wanted to show you is called Communication Workshop. It's a website. The website's just coreworkshop.org. And it too has a lot of awesome ideas for activities using core words. And so we'll just pick the word stop since that's what we were talking about. But you can, let me say first that over here you can pick which word you're talking about. And you can just see endless, they have all of these different words that they have lessons and activities for. So let me go back to stop. And it shows some different symbols that might be used on a device for stop. Examples of when to use, you can stop doing something or when something stops working. Modeling examples, which again, we'll talk about modeling in another webinar. But so if you have a one-word communicator, you might model something like stop now, you stop it, not stop, it stop. So modeling, if they're using one word, you're modeling two. And then a level 3, so your student is using 2 to 3 words. And here's what you can say: he did not stop, we can stop, will you stop? And then same thing if you're using, or if your student's using 4 or more words, here's what you could say. And you can see that these model some more grammatical structures and things like that. And then there are all these kinds of resources. So there are learning projects. So here's an idea of how you might be teaching or a project you can do with stop. Here's activity ideas. So stop and go. Books is one of the really cool things, I think, is that they give you books that you can use for shared reading. And these are not books like go find this at your library kind of books. It's like the book is in the website itself. And so you just click the book and it tells you all of the information. You can read that together. So a lot of on-demand stuff, topic starters, things to send home, those kinds of things. And then related core words that you might be teaching next. And so that has, I love that website just for, if you're running out of ideas or maybe you want to show this to some paraprofessionals or people working with a student, to family members of things that they can be doing for all these different words. And finally, I want to leave you with this. This is just, I can't emphasize enough how important functional language is. And so this is, pretend you have a flat tire. If you call 911 and say black circle, because I think we teach a lot of colors and shapes and stuff, especially in those young years first, that those dispatchers are not going to understand. They're not going to know what you mean. But if you call and say help, broke, stuck, hurt, that's going to tell people what you need. And so to really focus on those things that are functional and how to use those different things in different situations. Finally, thank you for sticking with me. I hope you got something out of this that you can use. Here's my email address. It's jessica.sorpt@gmail.com. So if you want to send me an email and talk more about any of this, I would absolutely love to. So thanks again for joining me and have a great day.
Thank you for watching this webinar. For more information on the ATP Education Program, please visit our website at atp.nebraska.gov or email us at atp.education@nebraska.gov.